Houses versus apartments. You'll hear a lot of noise in 2026 about apartments outperforming houses. On the surface, that sounds like a massive shift. But if you don't understand why that's happening, and more importantly, who it actually applies to, you're going to make the wrong call. For those of you who don't know me, I'm AJ, director at Handle Properties, and our buyers agency is purchasing about $10 million of property every single month, and this is only growing. We've helped hundreds of investors scale from their first property to build a multi-million-dollar property portfolio. And I want to be very clear up front so that there's no confusion for you or anyone else. Our core focus remains on houses because land is where the outsized long-term wealth is actually built. And that hasn't changed at all. But there is a nuance emerging in 2026 that smart investors need to understand, and ignoring it would just be as dangerous as overreacting to it in the first place. So, what is the data actually showing as we cast our eyes over to the next year? Recent data shows unit prices are growing much faster than houses in some markets. That's real. We're not denying it or putting that aside. But it's not because apartments have suddenly become more superior investment assets than houses. Rather, it's because affordability has become the dominant force in the market. As house prices push beyond borrowing limits, buyers don't just vanish. They compromise, they adjust expectations, and they change the types of assets that they're looking to actually buy. So instead of a buyer stretching into a $600,000 house, instead, they pivot into a $400,000 unit in a much better location. And when enough buyers do the same thing at the same time, demand compresses into the unit market. That's what we're seeing. This is not a land scarcity story, it's just a price ceiling one. And no distinction matters because one is structural and permanent and the other one is cyclical. So why do houses still dominate for serious wealth? At Handle Properties, houses remain the backbone of every scalable portfolio that we build. And there's a very simple reason for that. Houses give you land, and land is what does the heavy lifting for you over time. Land appreciates, land gets rezoned, land can be subdivided, land benefits from infrastructure uplift. Land compounds quietly while everything else catches up. That's why over 10, 15, or 20 years, houses consistently outperform apartments, especially when investors are actively recycling their equity to get that next deal. Apartments can move in short bursts. They can benefit from affordability and driven demand. But land creates a symmetry where one good purchase can materially change the trajectory of your entire portfolio. That's where the biggest wins actually come from. And that's why, where budgets allow, we have a massive bias towards purchasing houses for our clients. Not because it's good on social media, but because it actually works. So where do units actually make sense then to purchase looking forward in 2026? Now here's where many investors get tripped up. They hear houses are better and force a house purchase at any cost. But if your budget is sub $400,000, forcing a house can often mean you're buying on the fringe of a city, in areas with weaker income profiles, limited tenant demand, and fewer long-term growth factors. So in those scenarios, the idea of land doesn't just compensate for the reality of the location and the risk that you might be taking on. And this is where we'll be happily buying units, but very selectively. We would rather buy a high-quality, low-set unit than compromise on a house that's poorly located. But not just any unit. The units that we share are very specific and characteristic. They're usually ground floor or low-rise, small complexes, have some land component or a private backyard, have strong owner-occupier appeal, and tight vacancy rates, ideally below 2%. These units benefit from affordability-driven demand, rising inner-city rents, limited new supply growth, and strong lifestyle appeal. They are value plays. They keep investors active, and they preserve your borrowing power. And they avoid the trap of buying a cheap house that does become a long-term drag on your investment portfolio. This is about portfolio sequencing and not about ideology. The biggest mistake that investors make is treating houses versus units as a belief system. It's not. It's just a sequencing decision. For high-income earners or investors with borrowing capacity, well, we're going to push you hard to go into houses because they will create for you faster equity, quicker recycling of that equity that you've created, and a portfolio that scales quickly. And for investors earlier in the journey or capped in terms of lending, a well-selected unit can provide you with stable cash flow, reduced holding costs, keep the momentum of your portfolio, and avoid you sitting on the sidelines. But here's a key point that many miss. The unit is not the end goal. It's a stepping stone towards something bigger. The objective is always the same: transition into land-rich assets as quickly and as safely as the balance sheet allows. That's how real portfolios are built. Here's our position heading into 2026. Houses remain the engine for outsized wealth creation. Apartments are a tactical solution, but not the final destination that you are aiming for. If your budget allows for land, that's where we'll go. If it doesn't, we'll select units with discipline, scarcity, and still good upside. That's how you outperform the market, not by copying headlines, not by arguing asset classes, but instead by matching the right assets with the right phase of where you are in your portfolio. If you want help deciding where you should buy and in what order, then reach out to us. At Handle Properties, we buy 4 properties a week and help our clients build scalable investment portfolios that help them on their wealth creation journey. Like, subscribe, and comment if you want a follow-up video where we break down the exact unit types that we'll be buying in 2026, then comment 2026 in the comments as well.